Making games won't kill you, but running a studio might. It's a very dark topic, but we're actually going to be a lot lighter than that and a lot friendlier. So what we're actually here to do is a panel of people who can't push things properly. There we go. We're a panel of professional service providers, and we're going to cut through some of the fluff. I was going to say bullshit, but cut through some of the fluff and give you some insights on running a studio, on running a business, or running a business that happens to be a studio. So there's 5 of us, and we want to go through pretty quickly. So we'll do a quick intro down the couch, and then we're going to look at one tip or a couple of tips for early stage studios, so pre-production, pre-revenue, you haven't even made your first game, or you're just starting to come on in right up to the front. If you come in late, you have to come up to the front.
That's the rule.
That's the rule. So very early stage studios, and then another set of tips for growing studios. So after you've released a game, you're expanding the team, you're wanting to do a bigger and better game for your second one, or you're actually more established as a service provider and are coming up against some chunkier things to deal with. So, I'm doing terrible. So we've got insurance and legal and accounting and people and banking, and we're each going to give a brief intro to ourselves, starting with Aya.
Hey everyone, I'm Aya. I'm an insurance broker and I specialize in games specifically, and I work at Partridge Advisory. Games I play, many and various. I had to pick some and I put them up there. Don't judge. Thank you.
There'll be no judging of game choices. That's all right. We're very friendly here. My name's Wade. I'm a lawyer at Avid Legal, so I do corporate and commercial work and help a bunch of New Zealand studios. Some friends here to see. Good. And help you with a whole bunch of things when it comes to the legal side of the business. I play a lot of New Zealand indie games because they're really fun and I really enjoy them. And I'll hand over to Julian.
Hello, I'm Julian. I'm an accountant. I run a firm that provides fractional CFO services to startups and high growth companies. I'm a numbers guy. I play games on the phone, so 2048 is my favorite game, and Block Blast.
Hey everyone, I'm Nat. I'm the co-founder of Powrsuit, which is a professional development platform for busy women and the allies who champion us. We combine all sorts of cool stuff like bite-sized learning, peer coaching and micro-networking in one all-inclusive, really affordable membership so you can take step-by-step progress. The reason we focus on women, I always feel like it's worth saying that in 2025, is that in the NZX 50 at the moment there are still men named Mark as CEOs than there are women. There's still more of them. So while that gap exists, not just in New Zealand but around the world, we still have to provide tailored support for underrepresented groups to really help equal the playing field.
Hi everyone, I'm Olivia Donaldson. I'm the head of creative tech business at BNZ. So part of my role is working with tech industry's customers. And the other part of my role is looking at how we as a main bank can better support creative tech businesses in New Zealand. Games that I play, I absolutely love a word game. So Wordle, Connections. Actually, were you playing Wordle as I walked in? I did see that. And Wordle, Connections, Scrabble, and I also love Catan and Monopoly Deal.
All right, so that's us. So we're just going to launch straight in. I'm just going to turn a little bit. That's nicer. Right, so from the legal side of things, the one thing I want to leave with you today is to prioritise. When you're at an early stage, look, there are a lot of things you need to do, and you generally don't have a lot of money to do them. Lawyers can be pretty expensive, unfortunately. So to me, it's often a case of going, well, what do you really need to do, and what can you kind of just fudge and sort out yourself? If you can apply that kind of model, it makes life a lot easier, and you're less likely to spend $5,000 getting a trademark, but not actually have a good contract with your key people, and then you run into actual big issues down the line. So it's a case of knowing where to focus your efforts. If there's one thing on where to focus your efforts, I would say it's around intellectual property, your art, your music, your code, all the key assets of your game. You really want to make sure that you have those locked up tight, so you can do a lot of this yourself. You can write contracts, you can read the terms of open source licenses that you might be using for any tools. You can do a lot without needing to pay a whole bunch of money to a lawyer, and that's actually going to be really, really helpful and probably not super expensive. So that's my legal tip. Julian.
I got a couple of tips just around from the finance area's point of view. First of all is understanding your basic legal obligations around taxes. That's mainly around income tax, PAYE, GST. Don't ignore it because they will come back to you and they will come back to you, bite you in the ass real big, real hard. So don't ignore it. And I've seen companies ignore it and the price they paid is pretty high. Number two is understand where all the non-dilutive grant and capital can come from. You guys would know a lot about the co-funding, in early stage, in the later stage, the GDSR, where you can get some grant funding from there. For those companies or organizations that are doing technology development around in gaming, like potentially platform, tool sets, hardware. You're probably likely to be able to look at around R&D tax incentive or R&D credits as well. But that's an area I can talk to you if you are in that area. And lastly is if you can afford it, make sure you have the hygiene on finance. Just have the basic hygiene finance. Most of the founders are not finance or admin people. If you can afford it, just hire a bookkeeper to either help you to do all the finance bookkeeping or teach you how to do it at least. Because otherwise, when you start analyzing all the data, you come and ask me for help. I can't help you apart from telling you your data is just rubbish.
So we do a lot of work with early stage game studios, especially ones that are going through the code funding application process. And they all tend to be pre-release, pre-revenue. It's a 1 or a 2-person team. So for a studio like that, the main piece of advice I have is just get the basics right. In terms of insurance, that looks like a technology liability policy. So that's a very tech, very software specific insurance cover. It's made up of 2 main things. One is professional indemnity. And what that is it covers mistakes in the delivery or the development of your game. And of course, most importantly, is IP cover. So that's third-party claims against you for infringing on their IP. And that's basically it to start with. And you can just scale and go on from there. Now, this is a very contentious topic. You just said we're pre-release. You just said we're pre-revenue. Why are we buying insurance now? Why does it matter? There is a reason, and the main reason, unfortunately, has to do with how insurance policies work. It's not that I want you to do this and pay for it. And I'll explain that. So if you make a claim on your insurance, the wrongful act, which is the decision or the action that led to the claim, needs to have occurred during the policy period. And I'll give an example of that. So let's say you're in the early concept or design stage. You make a choice or a decision on the design of your main character. Time passes by, maybe you've even released, things are going pretty swell, and then suddenly you get slapped with an IP infringement lawsuit. Another studio is claiming that you're basically copying or just duplicating the design of their main character. We know this is expensive. Whether you're right or wrong here doesn't matter. If you're sued, you're sued. You've got to go to court. You've got to lawyer up. You've got to defend yourself. The first thing you do is make a claim on insurance because if it can cover everything, life will be good. But the first thing the insurer is going to ask is, so when did you make that character design choice? And if you didn't make it during the policy period, it's unlikely you're going to be covered. I like to liken my examples to real life examples. And just a couple of months ago, Sony sued Tencent because one of the smaller studios under them allegedly was copying Horizon Zero Dawn, specifically allegedly copying the character design and for the main character Aloy. And it's really difficult to contest this. You're still going to go through the process. I'm sure they didn't do it intentionally, but it's going to be a very drawn-out process. The game has not even been released yet. This was just from the promo material. And the release window isn't until Q4 2027. So they're already a little bit screwed, to be honest.
And actually, that can go both ways. Just thinking of Power World, it first came out and everyone goes, this is just Pokemon. And, nothing happened. Oh, cool, we're off the hook, we're fine. and then obviously they weren't fine and they're still getting sued, and who knows who will win, but yeah, it can be
The
messy.
crazy thing is, even Pal World, it was only out in the market for 6 to 7 months. It's not a long time, unfortunately.
Nat, over to you.
I'm probably a really good example of my point, my tip that I wanted to share with you today, because we got called in by a mutual friend to do this panel. And when I heard it was the Game Developers Conference, I immediately cancelled and said, despite spending my days telling other people not to call themselves imposters and to challenge their self-limiting beliefs and biases, as soon as I knew this was a gaming conference, I went, I don't belong there. I don't know what this is about. I didn't even, you may have noticed, mention the games that I play, because I don't feel like a gamer, until Wade followed up as an amazing ally and said, you do play games, I bet you've played a game before. And I said, actually, I'm basically a grandmaster of Tetris. And also I have played the odd game of Snap, etc. My girlfriend at the moment is probably in the middle of a massive board game up in Otaki, so she should be here instead of me. But that all leads me to my tip. When we talk about diversity, we often think there's these really tangible barriers to entry to different organisations. And when we start new companies, I've heard so many people, I come from a long background in startup world, and the general consensus often is diversity can be really hard originally. You want to move fast and you got your mate beside you and all of that sort of stuff. I'm telling you, it gets so much harder the further along you get to change that perception. You have to bake diversity in from day one if you want that to work. And the reason for that is we talk to all sorts of people all day, every day. And often we hear from CEOs and executives, we're putting out this job and we just can't find anyone to fill it other than a straight white man. There's just no other people applying. Maybe they lack confidence. Maybe there's none of them. And then we talk to other people and they say, I've looked at their about page and the only people in executive roles are straight white men. I don't have a place there. There is no path to success for me in that company. So my tip for small companies is start early and check your about page, like your literal about page that you have to the internet, because that is what you're advertising to people, what success looks like and who can succeed in your company.
Thanks, Nat. My tip for early stage studios is really simple. It's to start to build your relationships with professionals nice and early. So you're going to be running a gaming studio, which means you're going to be running a business, and no one knows or learns or expects you to know or learn how to run a business overnight. So starting to build that network of people that you can connect with and soundboard with and can provide you tips in areas of expertise that you may not have. So I know, for example, the people on this panel and the organisations on this panel are more than happy and open to have conversations. So yeah, law, insurance, people, managing a team, finance, accounting, there is lots of support available. And from BNZ's side, we are not just about debt. We've got a network of tech industry focused bankers across the country who are keen to support with connections and developing the capabilities of business owners and studio owners. And you'll be dealing with a banker who won't ask you what Steam is. So.
Right, so those are our tips for that early stage, but let's say you've gotten a bit further along, you've released a game, or you're really in market and doing some good work. In this case, I'm going to kind of overwrite everything I said last time. You don't need to prioritise as much. You actually, in my view, you should try and level up your compliance before you need to. And so what I mean by that is if you are a $1 million company, whatever that means, then try and act like you're a $5 million company or a $10 million one. You know, do a little bit more than you need to. Try and actually get this stuff right, because it now is a bit more important. If you infringe on someone's IP, they might look at you and go, oh, you know, yeah, I can see how many copies you've sold. You've probably got a couple of million sitting in the bank. You're a good target to sue. If you do that at an early stage, they'll look at you and go, you've got 5 copies. Like, there's no point trying to sue you because you've got no money. So it gets a bit chunkier. There's a lot of things that can go wrong. One of the good things about games is that you're selling overseas, you're generating revenue for New Zealand. Thank you for that. That's great. Export revenue is a good thing. Helps build hospitals and things like that. But what it does mean is that you're exposed to overseas laws. So you can't just kind of go, it's just New Zealand and, we're all kind of happy here and privacy fines are $10,000. That's basically nothing. You'll be subject to the GDPR, which can have millions or billions of dollars of fines. We could pull out some examples of big cases against some of the bigger companies. Some of them probably still not high enough fines, but that's just personal opinion. So look, it does get more involved. You have employment, right? By this point, you're probably employing people more than you're contracting them. And New Zealand employment law is, there's a fair amount to it, right? You can't just fire someone and say, turn off their email and access and say, hey, get out of here. You can do that in the States. Whereas in New Zealand, you can say something to the wrong person and they take them the wrong way and then they end up suing you and it's going to be really painful. And it's a bit more complicated than that. So look, there is a lot. Same with trademarks. Again, that's when someone might actually have a claim against you. So level up your compliance before you need to, because it's a lot harder to fix it after the fact, and it's generally a lot more expensive to fix it after the fact. Julian.
So a couple of pointers around growing studio. When the studio start growing or your business start growing, you generally have a lot more outgoings, whether it's people or other commitments. One thing is really important when you start growing is that you really need to have a cash flow forecast, knowing where your cash flow is looking like month on month in the future, in the short range, medium range, particularly if you are on a cash burn mode. So you are, your cash balance is reducing every month because you haven't got the sustainable break-even level yet. So knowing when you're going to run out of cash, the reason is that you really don't want to run out of cash and find out you run out of cash in 2 weeks' time. You want to know in 6 months' time that, hey, in 6 months' time, I'm about to run out of cash. What do I do? Because then you can actually go out and start looking for different facilities, different opportunities in terms of potential investment. The later you do it, the time gap between your cash run out date to the time that you make an action, the least negotiating power you have in any transaction that you have, whether it's with your customers or whether with investors or someone giving you a loan. So having a cash flow forecast, knowing early so you know when you're going to run out of cash is critical. And two other points that's probably quite linked is, just going back to the point, one other thing that just around cash flow is that if you're running a profitable business or you start moving to become a profitable business, in the first year of you making money, the second year you need to pay 2 years of taxes in one go. And a lot of companies didn't realize that's the case. So they find out they spend all those cash that they got in the profit in the first year, and then they found out that all my free cash for this year are gone, because I need to pay 2 years of taxes, because you need to pay last year's of taxes and this year's of taxes altogether. So that's cash flow forecasting. Just link back to that is quite important. And the two other points I've got on the slide in here is quite linked. It's around understanding your unit economics, which what I mean by that, like understanding every single unit of hour that you're selling, if you are selling your services, or whether you're selling the app, knowing what your margin is. And also understanding that, hey, when is your break-even pointer? So how many customers do I actually need until I start not losing money? So understanding all that, so you know what you need to do around in terms of decisions, in terms of finance decisions, so you know what your target is every single month.
So as you scale, maybe you've got multiple titles under your belt now. Maybe you're even raising capital. You most definitely have staff now. Your risk profile changes pretty drastically. Instead of being very concerned about the game development specific risks, you now need to be more concerned about the more BAU risks of running a business. In terms of insurance, again, this makes management liability or management liability package more relevant. And it's just a catch-all term for a few different types of insurance that are very business specific. I'm going to cover around 3 of the most important ones just for today. So we know that IP is already the most heavily litigated topic in the game development industries. Next after that is employment issues and disputes. And this can range from wrongful dismissal to things as bad as sexual harassment. In insurance, there's employment practices liability, and what that does is it covers those expenses. The dispute, the mediation, the legal counsel, legal defense, even settlement. And of course, because I really like to introduce examples, a really bad one that happened only 2 months ago is the 3 executives at Ubisoft that got basically done in for bullying and sexual harassment. And it was so bad that not only did they have to pay fines, but they were literally sentenced to prison. This is not me fear-mongering, but thought it was a pretty cool and sad story to share that is happening in our own industry, unfortunately. So after that, another thing to consider is that if you're raising capital or if you already have investors on your cap table, the due diligence process is going to look for a specific type of insurance. They want you to have this, and that's directors and officers liability, or D&O. So as the director of a company, you have a high fiduciary duty. You have a high degree of responsibility to look after the business. So if you run a business poorly and you mismanage it, you become personally liable. And by personally liable, I mean your money, your assets are on the line to recoup those costs and damages. So when a shareholder and investors, what they want to know is if you mess up and you drive the company into the ground, that there's something there that they can use to get money out of you. And that's usually in the form of insurance. You might not have $3 million worth of assets sitting around. And if you did, you don't want to put your house on the market and then live on the streets because that's happened. And again, another example that happened, again, pretty recently. For some reason, a lot happened in July of 2025, guys. It's been a very busy time. But you guys may already know this, but the Crafton, the publisher that owns Unknown Worlds, studio behind Subnautica, basically they fired the founding team, the directors. Then they sued them for mismanagement. That didn't go so well because the directors then clapped back at the publishers suing them for delaying the release of Subnautica 2 because they didn't want to pay out the $250 million in bonus related to the release. And look, the last one, which is pretty relevant, is more games, more users, more data, more player data, but also your own data that you need to be responsible for, you need to be really careful about. And in insurance, there's cyber liability insurance. It comes as no surprise that this covers costs relating to data breach, privacy breach, downtime, whatever. But the most important thing, but people don't know about this, and why I always talk to the studios, especially the early ones, that when you get close to release, get this, is because it gives you immediate access to cyber forensics team, crisis management PR team, and lawyers to deal with the issue. You're not going to be able to pull all these strings and find all these people. You've got network downtime right now. You need to fix it right now. And just as an example that just happened last year, there's a studio pretty close to home that was the victim of a data breach where 4 terabytes of source code, unfathomable, that's a lot of code, was basically stolen from them. None of their users were affected, but they definitely were. Yeah.
I said to Aya before, we're basically in the same industry. And I say that because all your examples can also be solved through diversity a lot of the time. It's another tool in our toolbox. If you are in a company where there is a high degree of varied opinions and varied perspectives, you are less likely to have those cases of shockingly hidden sexual harassment. Same with IP. When you've got people with really varied interests, you see this in every industry. You start to see different people go, oh, wait a second, I think I've seen that in this thing that I've done, which would otherwise be quite hidden. The third reason why diversity is a really good insurance is we actually have a lot of hidden costs in businesses, and one of the big ones is quiet quitting. It costs about, the estimates are about between 50 to 200% of someone's salary when they leave the company, and lost IP, lost time, recruitment costs, getting someone else up to speed. And the number of people I meet who leave an organization because they don't feel welcome, it is shocking that, and all of these amazing talent, all of this amazing talent leaves companies and industries. And I feel like I'm kind of preaching to the converted here, but my tip for larger organizations is, again, pretty simple. When you are part of a majority, it's really easy to feel really comfortable. And I don't want to say I like set my dad up, but we host a lot of events, and I invited him along to one recently, and he walked in and said, oh my goodness, you didn't tell me I'm the only man here. And I said, oh, that's a really interesting reaction, because like no one ever tells me that I'm the only woman in the room, and I turn up anyway. But one thing that I thought was really interesting, he's like ex-military. You watch this 70-something-year-old man surrounded by these women who make him feel welcome. And it just struck me that when we are used to being part of a majority, we relax, we're comfortable, we're in our safe space. And sometimes we forget to go out of our way to make sure other people for whom that may not be as comfortable feel comfortable. So if you are ever part of a minority, which I feel like a lot of people in this room are, if you're not part of that minority, go join a group sometimes, because you'll find they're the most welcoming people, because we all know what it feels like. But if you are part of the majority, I think it's really important to put it upon yourself to be proactive about welcoming other people in. I spoke to someone last night and they were just incredible. This really confident, really fun, really energetic person at the pre-drinks for this. And they said partway through their story of like coming into this company, and I was like, you must be like running it. And they were like, I felt so out of place. And I was like, what? But they felt so out of place because they were the only person who looked like them there, until the day they walked in and saw a whole bunch of people playing with tiny models and went, what are you doing? And it was a Dungeons and Dragons game, and they all connected on that. And it just struck me that this is such an easy tip for all of us to keep people in industries and in companies. If you're part of the majority, proactively reach out, and that can be something so simple like asking someone for a quick coffee, saying hello when you meet each other, taking on the work of welcoming someone in. And that's probably the case with anyone new to an organisation, but specifically if they're the only one who looks or acts like them, because it doesn't look like a tangible barrier, but that is what gets people to leave. So very simple, and something we can all do.
Thanks, Nat. For growing studios or any creative tech business that is starting to wonder about bank funding, might be useful to understand the difference between uncertainty and risk. So uncertainty is where there's a future situation where the future outcome is A, unpredictable, B, unmeasurable, and C, there is no previous information to qualify the potential outcomes. So banks don't love to work in uncertainty, but we do like to work with mitigated risks. So risks where there is an element of predictability, things can be measured, and there is previous information to qualify potential outcomes and assign probabilities to those. So for example, for studios that have a contract with a publisher, for example, or have steady revenues from services or previous titles, there's something tangible for us to discuss and assess. And for every studio, that will look completely different depending on the stage that they are at. But I think knowing, helping to shift the uncertainties into understood and defined risks will give your studio access to support from the wider ecosystem, not just from a bank, but really understanding and articulating what the risks are within your business.
And like that's a really good point too. I think that how you articulate this as a risk, not an uncertainty, is really important. But you can also kind of demand a little bit from us, right? Like we're all here because we want to be here and we enjoy games and we want to support the industry. But you can use other people, that's fine. We won't be too offended. Okay, apart from Nat, yeah, okay. So the three of us are fine with it. These two are, yeah, okay, you know. But the point is, you completely threw me off. No, it's fine. The point I was trying to make before I completely forgot what I was going to say, and I still haven't remembered what I'm filling this time in until I remember. Yes. Find services and expect a bit from us, right? Because if you talk to your lawyer and they just don't understand what you're doing and they haven't done this before, you know, get a different one who does know what they're doing. And that applies to me, right? If it's something that's not in my area, I'm not going to go, oh, okay, I'll figure it out. I'm going to go, I'll put you in touch with this person who does know it. Banking, just an anecdote I've had, and I won't name the banks, but the good one is BNZ in this case. I'm not ragging them out. So, you know, a client who had the GDSR coming in, so they knew there was a rebate coming. They needed a little bit of extra cash just for working capital. When they went to their bank, which was not BNZ, they said, hey, we've got this GDSR, and the bank was basically like, how do you spell GDSR? Like, what is that? So instead of getting them, good terms for just a short-term loan where you've got money coming in, they saw that as risk. They saw that as uncertainty, whereas actually it was just a risk, and it was a mitigated risk. And so in that case, I think being with a bank that understood that would have made life a lot easier for them. And these things happen, and it's fine. And it was all resolved well. But it is important who you get to, and it's okay to kind of demand a little bit from us, not too much, but a little bit. So right. So we're basically at the end. We've got a lot of time for questions, I'm pretty sure. Final tips, look, I've got them up there. I don't know why I'm turning like this. Start building those relationships early, reach out for support. I said we don't bite, but then they all said no, we might. So I don't bite, but I can't speak for these 3, 4. Not too hard. Okay, all right. That was concerning. And again, I've been thrown off. So look, reach out. We're here to help. This is good. I need to work on my, dealing with heckling from my own teammates, apparently. So I thought the crowd would be the problem, but they're lovely. So look, we have a lot of time for questions. So do fire away. I can give you this one, and then one of us will answer it with the microphone. So I'm going to hand this over, and please ask at least one question. Otherwise, we'll just awkwardly sit here for a good 20 seconds.
I don't know.
That's all good. Okay. I'm mostly, first of all, thank you for your information. It's been really enlightening. But also, I'm very curious about, with regards to people trying to get into the industry or at different scales of studio, how would you sort of think about selecting for people in terms of, do they even want to be part of your business? And, I guess some people will just go with who they know, and some people will go through an actual HR process and get ads on Seek or whatever it may be. So I'm just wondering if you would have any guidelines as to what are maybe some best practices of selecting for the right people who will actually be a good fit.
Oh, I can answer that. Well, we just had a conversation about that before with going into an interview and being asked what your favourite development coding languages are, programming languages, and nothing about other skills like adaptability, critical thinking, problem solving, anything like that. There are a whole raft of different ways you can remove bias from your hiring process. And the first one is one that you labelled, is not just turning to your mates, because all of us are the same. Humans love other humans who look and act like them. We all have bias. We all love that stuff. So trying to remove a lot of that from the process is really, really important. Because you actually do want that diversity in your team. So there's a bunch of tools. A friend of mine has started a company called Empathics, and it's a recruitment platform that uses AI to actually remove a lot of the bias. And I've seen some of her notes on LinkedIn. You should follow them on LinkedIn if you don't already. And around how even when she was going to pick candidates and deselect them from the process, her tool would tell her something quite different, and often that person would end up getting the job. So all of us have that bias. The questions you ask, standardized questions, different people interviewing different people. So we at our last company, I used to run an investing platform, and we would have 5 or 6 people interviewing every single person, and every single time we had very different perspectives, and we brought those in and discussed them and found all our different biases that would come out, so we could find them. The final tip I'd say, which is really easy, is capability testing as well, really understanding, does someone have the capabilities or do they not? And that's sometimes through scenarios, because if you ask a lot of questions and talk a lot about, not necessarily talking about personality stuff, but if you get along with someone and if you feel like they're like you, through that line of questioning, you tend to have a slight bias towards them. So focusing more on the skills and things they bring to the table. Does anyone else have anything else?
I actually had a follow-up question to that because, yeah, especially these days, we're seeing a lot more interest and thankfully support for people with neurodiverse sort of tendencies, or like, yeah, people who are neurodiverse. But I'm wondering if there is still any sort of things that we would need to look out for, because I mean, yeah, there are some particular conditions, let's say, that might just make someone harder to hire in some instances. So especially for smaller studios, like, yeah, how would we go about navigating that and making sure that we are being supportive and we are increasing diversity wherever we can, but we're also doing it in a way that is safe for the business as well?
Friction is amazing. You want friction. You want people who are different from you. And it is on all of us to create spaces that work for different people. So you could replace neurodiversity with parents and caregivers, or different generations, or different ethnicities, or different genders. Doesn't really matter what it is. That is the grit you need to make really smart decisions. And so I would say it is our job to figure out ways to create environments that work for different people. And actually, a lot of that stuff is really simple. An example I heard recently, one company, 2 women had just come back from parental leave. Both of them ended up in the people and culture team bawling. One of them said, I came back and they've taken everything off me. They're not letting me travel anymore. They've taken all my responsibility off me. I feel like they've just minimized my abilities. The second woman said, I feel completely overwhelmed. I've got way too much on. They're expecting way too much from me. Same organization. And the only thing that they needed to tweak was to just ask each person what they needed. And if you just ask people what works for you, so easy, we so easily overlook it. What can I do for you? How do you like to be communicated with? How do you like to work? How do you like to be involved in meetings? Some people like to prep and send notes beforehand. Some people dive in, facilitating meetings to actively point to people who haven't spoken, and realize when people don't like to be called on the spot. So ask them in advance to prepare 1 or 2 things. There are, again, a massive range of things, and I think it's a brilliant question, because sometimes we confuse difficulty or grit or friction for bad, and it's actually the thing we want. Too much easiness. Like, my co-founder and I, we disagree on so much stuff, and it's sometimes bloody frustrating. But I'm like, this is what makes us exceptional, because we make each other's ideas better because we bring those 2 disagreements to the table.
Thanks very much for that.
Yeah, I can hear me. Yeah, right. Thank you. Not a big question because some of that was covered, but Aya, with insurance, do you also take a mitigated risk approach? Like, are we best to go through all of our processes and see what we think the risks are going to be and lay that out as to what we're going to do to mitigate them before we engage in actually what the cover required is, or is it quite blanket cover within this?
So I guess to start with, one thing I didn't really cover in this presentation for lack of time is how getting insurance works, right? I mean, usually you engage with a broker who then goes to the market for you, representing you to insurers to get you insurance. The difficulty, one of the biggest things I've spoken about before in other talks, is that you're going to go to a broker here, they're probably going to go to a local market. Local insurance market does not understand game studios. They just do not. If any of them, so either you get no, can't do it, don't understand it, so they don't even want to bother, or they'll say, yeah, I totally can, but then you're getting pretty restrictive cover, like you won't get IP cover. They won't even tell you that it's just not part of the package, or you're paying something stupid like 10 grand when you don't even have 10 grand to your name to be spending on it. So in terms of mitigated risk, so one thing we do is, to begin with, we engage with insurers that know game studios. So international insurers, they work with big studios, small studios all over the world. The good thing about this underwriting process in this engagement is the information that they need tends to be an indication of what you need to be doing. So one of the big pieces of cover that is hard to get is the IP. Because there are going to be a lot of things, a lot of IP checks that they're going to want you to have done. And in the first instance, unless you've already engaged with an IP lawyer and ticked off all of those things, it's going to be difficult to get IP cover. But that signals to you, okay, that's something I need to do. So it becomes a discovery process, and it opens up the different things that you need to start working on, the different things that you need to start thinking about, the different other professionals you need to engage with. And I think in this industry, I think the lawyer is very, very, very important, because apart from having really tightly sealed IP and having very clear checks, the other biggest thing is your contract. And as far as insurance goes, that's one of the biggest ways to mitigate your risks. There's a lot we can do in terms of looking at part of the indemnity clauses in your contract, but if you want to be as mitigating as you possibly can, you need to engage with a good lawyer that's going to write up a really, really tightly sealed contract for you. Anyways, that's all to say that it's part of the process. We tend to uncover it in the process. We're happy to put you in touch with people like Wade to help you in that regard. But you end up finding out a lot that you need to work on. And the good thing about engaging early, truly, is that, okay, you can start budgeting for his bill, among other things, right? But yeah, I hope I've answered your question.
I'll just add on to that. Yeah, that does quite often happen. Is it's someone gets sent to us because it's because they get insurance, and part of that is this is not so much in gaming, but you've got no terms of trade. You kind of need some, and then we can help with that and get it sorted. And so it goes back to that prioritization point. If it's just some random contract, you could probably do it, but it's not the end of the world. Whereas this one, this is the one you need to get your insurance. You need your insurance. That's good to do now. Let's focus on that. And we always try and be very pragmatic and focused on what to do. It's also worth not doing too late. That period before launch, if anyone here has launched a game, is pretty full on. So you don't want to be going, and I've got to do some business stuff with insurance, and get that done early on, and later you will thank yourself.
Sorry, is, if you've worked with us, you sort of know that the thing we try and put in place first, I talked about technology liability, but what we do is we make sure it's sort of ready for release. It's already global, it's worldwide cover. We mentioned we'll do our best to get the IP already in it. If we couldn't, then we'll make sure to get you to do what you need so that we can get the IP included. And so it's ready to go. And so we don't really need to talk before release, but we can sort of check in with each other. So I think that's, again, doing it early, it can be a one and done process for the most part. Of course, we will check in with you regularly regardless. Yeah.
And I don't know if we said this before, but correct me if I'm wrong. If you then launch the game and you sell 500 copies and it kind of doesn't go as well as you thought, and so you don't really need a whole lot of cover because no one's playing the game anyway, then you can cancel and you haven't paid a giant amount. Whereas with contracts, you can't really do that as well. We can't undo all the work we've done. So that's a good thing about insurance. So yeah, any other questions?
Hello, I hope this question's all right. So we've talked a lot about small businesses, early stage businesses, and as an early stage business, they can seem like there's an infinite number of things that you have to do. Do you have anything that comes to mind in each of your industries where it doesn't make sense to think about until you're $10, $100 million, like a service or a process or an idea, like anything that we don't need to worry about immediately that we can worry about later? It is a tricky question.
It's a really good question.
Sorry.
I've got to think about my answer. The one that comes to mind for me is trademarks. A lot of people go, I'm starting a business, I need a trademark. And you're like, well, that's going to cost $5-10 grand. You probably don't need it yet, but it's also one that you will need, and if you get it too late, it's bad, so it's not the best example. Probably corporate structure. Sometimes, you'll see, you can have an IP company and a holding company and an operating company, and you've got IP licenses between them. Look, you generally don't need that straight away, and if you do, you won't be listening to me anyway, and that's fine. You'll have some good reasons for doing it. So, yeah, one company is fine. That's nice and simple. Don't worry about any other stuff just yet. That'll be my one.
Thank you.
I think one of the main things that I would probably mention is we talk a lot about IP defense cover, because that tends to be baked in anyways, because we sort of assume you're an early stage company. It's pretty likely that maybe you're infringing on someone else's IP. But on the flip side, there is also insurance for IP pursuit. So that's if you see someone else infringing on your IP, And again, for those of you who have put a lot of creative effort into your games, you want to be able to do that. However, again, until you're at the size and scale where you could financially afford to do that, because even with the insurance, yes, it can cover the cost, but it's the only type of insurance where you have co-insurance. So you need to have skin in the game. So you're making a claim like, I think that studio's infringing on my IP. The insurer's like, okay, but you pay 10% of the cost, okay? Because we're not so sure about this. And so that, I think, only becomes more relevant when you're of a size where that fiscally is more feasible.
Cool, thank you.
I think I'll just go back to the points I talked about. If you're not sitting within the 3 points I talked about, basic tax obligation, you understand, finance hygiene, there's a bit of finance hygiene. Anything else, no, your finance advisors tell you need to do this, probably not as important. Those are probably the 2 things you really need to have.
I think we're all kind of saying the same thing, which is like, it feels like as your business grows, it actually goes through different stages. So it's not necessarily you don't do the stuff, it's just that the stuff you do doesn't have to be the same. In my experience, things like when you're at that really early stage and let's say even 10 or fewer people, you can kind of scrap things like really hardcore job descriptions, and you're not going to have the structures in place. You don't need like middle managers, and you don't need a lot of stuff. I mean, I might be disagreeing with all of you, but in my experience, we never really bothered writing a lot of processes and stuff down because you're sort of forming it all as you go. So almost being more intentional about this is a stage, and up until this stage we can operate like this, and that's okay because it's a future us problem. But when you hit like 10, we went in our last startup, we went from 10 people, jumped to 25 over the first lockdown, really fun, and then went from 25 to 65 over 6 months. That breaks real quick. So just being really aware of you can do scrappy little stuff when you start, but just know that when you hit a certain point, you actually are going to have to stop and redesign things to work for that stage. So like if you don't need to do it now, that's cool, but just know you'll have to stop. But yeah, there's a bunch of stuff that most things can be done in very scrappy ways to start.
It's a really good question. I would perhaps not as relevant as in early stages. You're probably not going to be doing big requests for finance pitch decks or big investment decks, or but the discipline of doing those is quite useful in that you get your story tell quite polished and you do articulate the risks and the mitigants like we've discussed. So whilst I would say the beautiful, polished, fancy documents aren't as relevant, the thought process and the ability to articulate what you're making, why it's important for the customer or whatever market you're trying to serve. Don't lose that, but you probably don't need the bells and whistles and the fancy graphs and the, yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Don't know if we've got any other questions, but all right, we'll allow one more then. Bonus question.
Just coming back to the risk side, obviously as a banker, we love mitigating risk from insurance side of things. Can we look to insure contracts, like a publishing contracts, or like say hypothetical scenario, a studio is doing a lot of work for Netflix, and they've got say $5 million contract. Is there any insurance that could cover that?
Yes, there is. I think, first of all, the 2 things. The first thing is we need to be very clear about what the work is exactly. So if you're providing a service, so let's say you're a software consultant, you're a game developer, you provide consulting services to other companies, it's very clear what this contract is for. It's your professional service and your advice. In that sense, the insurance is very clear because that would go under the umbrella of professional indemnity, which I mentioned before, which is covering mistakes in delivery development, right? Okay. So as long as there's a very clear scope that translates into insurance, yes, that makes sense. The other thing, and again, if you're working with a company like Netflix, actually what often is the case is they already have an insurance requirement baked into the contract. often that's actually the main issue we have is you're looking at a contract. I work with a few startups that have expanded to the US. And my goodness, when you look at the indemnity section, we're talking a bootstrap company that's really barely has any money. They have these crazy insurance requirements, the US being the US, and it's difficult. So it ends up we're in a situation where we need to match the contract. We do our best to negotiate it down, but sometimes we're not really the decision makers in the deal. So again, oftentimes it's the contract that dictates the insurance. We do as much as we can to get external third-party independent reviews so that we can have that basis to go back and say, actually, that's too much or that's not quite right. But yes, usually the contract dictates the insurance.
Thank you very much. That's a lucky last.
Wow. Well, thank you very much for coming. That's it. We are around for a little while if you do have any other questions. But I just want to say thank you for having us. This has been really fun. This is my first time doing a panel at NZGDC, and it's awesome because these guys are really smart, and I'm just sitting here going, this is great. Like, why are you listening to me talk? Like, this is good. So, look, thank you all for coming, and enjoy the rest of the conference.